Thanks, Michael. So hopefully everyone can hear me all right. I'm on Route 80 heading to nearly Iowa. I just crossed into Indiana from Ohio, and so I hope that my cell service is all right. Um, Typically, I do a extended background on the company, kind of what our macro goals are and why we view the industry the way that we do. I think that for the purpose of this call, it's better spent just going straight into Q&A because we have a lot of people on the call. And my background and where I came from, that's all posted on YouTube. So if anyone is interested in that side of things, you can go on our company YouTube channel and listen to it. But just real briefly, I started this business thinking that I was going to stay in my career in finance. I was working at T. Rowe Price in Baltimore, Maryland, and I had a really nice job and I enjoyed it a lot. But I've always been entrepreneurial, so I thought if I had this side business, I'd scratch that itch and kind of be able to move on with my life. And it turns out that I just wasn't built to not run a business. And so even though I very easily could have continued my career in finance and maintained the oil change business, that wasn't the path for me. And so I spent a lot of time at my desk at T. Rowe Price, reverse engineering the reviews from Yelp. Yelp was still relevant at the time, and I thought that the industry had some gaps in the consumer service and their needs, and there's some reputational issues with the industry as well. And so I thought that there were some voids that we could fill, and I think that most great businesses and most businesses that become large companies, they do a good job of filling a consumer need, and that's what we're trying to do here by specializing in the oil change only model. And so our industry has kind of gone off in this direction of an all of the above approach, where there's some of the competitors are starting to do multiple services, which require a lot more overhead and a lot more skilled labor, and it just made the whole business a lot more expensive. And for us, by resolving first and foremost the building model and then tweaking the labor model to be able to have the same unit economics as a Jiffy Lube without having a Jiffy Lube overhead, that was really the goal for us. And so we feel as though we've done a good job of doing that. And we've been able to grow the corporate side very well. And then from a franchising standpoint, the model really resonates, and we've been able to sell a lot of territories. We've sold over 100 territories in the last 14 months. And as an emerging brand, that's just not something that happens frequently. And so we're very proud of that. And I think part of the reason is we hold true to our values, our core values in the model. And, as an emerging brand, we don't rubber stamp every single person who comes through our Discovery Day doors. And so not a lot of emerging brands can say that. And I feel as though that's created a tight group of franchisees who really believe in the model and what we're trying to achieve. And for the long term, the long goal of becoming a national brand and being synonymous with fast oil change, I think that's going to serve us well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to Michael to curate Q&A. We do have a Discovery Day coming up this week. I won't be a part of it, but it does go into more of the secret sauce of the business. So we try to keep questions as macro as possible on these calls because we do get into specifics later on. Of course, if you have any pointed questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I'll let Michael go around the room and we can ask as many questions. I've got 7 hours of driving, so we can go as long as we want, Michael.
Okay, good. All right. Well, for those of you that are on here, I think I mentioned 45 minutes, but if you have to go, please just put something in the chat box if you've got any further questions, and I'll ask them on your behalf. We also do record this call, and Costa uploads it to the franchise portal in the Costa Oil website. And so it is available along with some others if you'd like to to listen to other calls that we've done. I'm going to move from left to right on my screen, just so everyone gets a chance to answer a question. Once we get through everyone, then I'll start off again. Wally, you came up first, and thank you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, my question has to do with brand recognition for those of us, and that's probably most on the call, who don't have any Costa Oil places here in our market, and we're starting the brand. How much of a hurdle is it that there is no brand recognition, say, in San Antonio or Austin?
So in our space, because we're a geographically restricted business, branding and franchising typically allows for customers day one to recognize the company and patronize a business because you recognize the brand. But for an oil change business where your 85% of your customers come from within a 3-mile radius, brand doesn't have nearly the kind of impact that other industries have, because if you win your market, you've won your market. And so in a very franchise saturated industry such as the quick lube industry, Jiffy Lube has operators that are really, really good operators, and they can transcend some of those reputational issues by winning their market. And people know that it's the best place to go in town, and they don't have to worry about, because brand can also go both ways as well. It can go positive, it can go negative. And so for us, we have a very extensive marketing manual. I cut my teeth in this industry by being very forward thinking when it comes to the newer technologies. If anyone on this call has heard of Gary Vaynerchuks, I was featured in one of his books for the marketing efforts that we did to grow this business basically from nothing. And so we do a lot to get people in the doors, and then we think that our model is a better mousetrap, and that's what gets people to come back.
And then thank you for that, Costa. Real quick, also, so you 100 territories in 14 months and I mean that's very impressive. Do you have a sort of goal in mind for when and what point Costa can start marketing on a national level?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually a really intuitive question into how I operate, because we originally did have a national brand fund that I personally vetoed before our FDD was filed, because I didn't feel as though it was fair to take an extra 2% from the franchisee's gross for a national campaign when we don't have a national presence. And so I believe the language was changed to, once we have 50 operating locations, there's a 12 or 14-month window that we will begin taking at our discretion a national brand fund. So it's ambiguous language, because I'm still, even at 50, I don't know if I want to do a national brand fund. But to your point, very local targeted marketing is much more effective than us doing a commercial, or what some of these other regional brands do with sponsoring different types of things that don't really have a great ROI for the operators. And I'm a very operator centric person at my core. I am an operator, so I built this business through that prism of always viewing, how do I make everything easier for my operators once their store is open. And so that 2%, I didn't want to take it off the top.
Okay. Hey, listen, thank you for that, Costa. And I've got other questions, but I'll yield to others. And then if you have time, Michael, we can come back around to me.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for your question. Jerry Inman from Florida, West Palm Beach. Do you have a question?
Is there any assistance in terms of identifying and hiring the right employees?
We have targeted lessons on hiring, because we actually benefit from being a skilled trade, in the sense that at a very base level, the employees who work for us have a interest in the matter. Most of the guys that work for us are car guys, And so, I've owned a pizzeria in the past, and one of the toughest things to hire is a line cook or kitchen help, because it's just a temporary job for them, and they'll trade up to the next place for a 25-cent raise. Whereas, we're able to command a little bit lower work from these guys, because they have an inherent interest in the work that they're doing. And because we're only doing oil changes, they don't have the ability to demand, they don't have the leverage to demand a higher salary as a ASC certified mechanic would. So, we use almost exclusively Facebook for finding staff. For better or for worse, Facebook does allow you to screen candidates before you even bring them in, based on whatever metrics you want to use in terms of creating the questions and getting them in the door. It actually used to be a lot more expansive until, some of the problems that Facebook got into with the way that you were allowed to target people. But, we'll use Indeed for territory managers, but at the store level, Facebook is very, very effective, especially if you put some dollars behind it. It can target candidates and put qualified people in front of you very quickly. And so our franchise, whoever is your assigned associate franchise coordinator, will walk you through how to run these ads and best practices. It's not something that we'll do on your behalf, but it's a pretty straightforward thing, and it's not as difficult in our industry as it is in, say, some other industries like quick service restaurant.
Okay, got it.
That help. Great. Christine, do you have a question for Costa?
I did. Let me think about it.
I know you're going to be joining us for part of the Discovery Day on Thursday. Is it market related to California, Long Beach?
Yes. So my thing is, if we do move forward with owning a Costa franchise, it takes about a year before this, completely finishing it, right?
The building itself is a pretty quick turnaround, although we have a pipeline right now, and our buildings are prefabricated and shipped out on a truck. And so our current capacity is to build one building a week. And the actual assembly of the building, once the building's been delivered to site, is a very short time. The longest portion of the process is site selection. We're coming out of a very weird real estate market where a lot of landlords, have had FOMO, and they're worried that by giving us space, they're losing out on a much larger, potential tenant. But, our argument to them is, that space has been parking space for the last 20 years. Why do you think all of a sudden you're going to get a Chick-fil-A to come on that lot? But we have one of the best franchise tenant side master brokers in the country, and they do a great job of targeting sites and putting multiple addresses in front of all of our franchisees. And then they do a great job of negotiating the terms of the lease, and we've also they've done a good job of putting relationships in front of us. So we're in the middle of working out a deal with Kroger grocery stores and Meijer grocery stores for a flat rate across the country. Obviously, that doesn't help California, because I don't believe Kroger and Meijer is in California. But site selection is much more time consuming than the actual physical putting up of the building.
Does that work, Christine? Your question? Answer your question.
California, interestingly, because we have a handful of California franchisees, and I think there's going to be a lot of conversion opportunities for California with existing facilities, because they're very onerous to repurpose, and California has a lot of regulations around remediation and things like that. So I think California has a lot of potential if a site can be identified A lot of the original quick lubes are in their 40th year. And so if they are a franchise, that's essentially second renewal for someone like a Jiffy Lube. And I think there's going to be opportunities out there for conversions, but new construction in California is always a process. The permitting, to your point, Christina, that is a variable that we can't account for, and that's on a county by county, town by town basis. And so we haven't had to deal with that quite yet.
So potentially it lasts longer than a year.
Between site selection and permitting, I mean, I know of projects in California that have been going on for 4 to 6 years, not auto repair related, but just in general as a state in terms of development.
Yeah, so I think Christine, what I had shared with you that we use is, on the fast side, when we have a conversion like we recently did in Mesa, Arizona, that was there was some negotiations on that the owner did. In fact, he purchased that location. I think that was about a 5-month period for Ryan and Andrea on the short side. And I think, given the search process for leases and securing the lease, negotiating it, it would be reasonable to expect that, that could take 3 to 5 months. And then of course you go through the permitting process, and then the build is not a problem. So I think a year, is a reasonable expectation. Anyway, Tim, you're up next. Do you have a question, you or Jason, for Costa? Okay, they are both on mute. All right, let's move on. Andy, welcome. Do you have a question for Costa?
Not at the moment. The question was about the leasing and finding the space, so I think I got that answered.
Okay, great. Well, we'll come back. We'll come back around again. Brian,
just to circle back real quick, like the due diligence that you can do before any other process is making a phone call to the local zoning office and just asking, what is this town's appetite for a quick lube? To Michael's point, a conversion is always quicker because you only need a C of O, and since the use is not changing, the C of O is very easy to get. The Pierces actually took possession of their building within a month, and then it took them 5 months to get open because contractors were very difficult to find, and they repainted the entire building and did a bunch of other work. But they actually had possession of the building within a month of joining the system. But that's a conversion of an existing building that doesn't need to be built, and there's no permitting involved. It's literally applying for the C of O, which is certificate of occupancy, having an inspection done, and then opening your doors. But at a very base level, if you call your local, whatever jurisdiction it is, a lot of times and I can't speak to California specifically, but in most states, like in Ohio, like in Indiana, like Texas, they oftentimes have blanket zoning for commercial, and then depending on the type, you have to do what's called a variance or a special use permit, or a conditional use permit, and that's one hearing that you present your plan to, and after you get the conditional use permit, then you're off to the races. But it's very specific to each jurisdiction, and we try to prepare our franchisees with the most tools necessary to go into these conversations. So we provide an SPCC, which is a spill prevention, containment, and countermeasure book. States like having those, and it's just one more tool in your in your pocket to be able to defend against some person who may be like, what impact does this have on our community negatively? We provide as much education as possible surrounding it to make those hearings, to basically not give them a reason to say no, to not say yes.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that additional info. Brian, you're up next. Do you have a question for Costa? Okay, Brian, we'll get back to you. Oh, there we are.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes, hi. Hi, Brian, we can now.
Apologize for that. So thank you for including me on the invite for today's call. I appreciate it. Good morning, Costa. My name is Brian Griefer. I've been working with Michael for the past couple of weeks, very new to the process, and I'm definitely in a learning and exploratory phase. So wanted to take the opportunity to thank you and to dial in today just to listen to other people's questions and start to learn from their experience.
Yeah, no problem.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Wally, I know you had some additional questions. We'll come back to you.
Oh, great. Listen, Costa, could you, if you would, just very generally talk about some of the significant risks for new franchisees and also some of the keys to success of some of the new ones? I know you're relatively new, but for those who are having a tough time or struggling, what is the biggest reason why they struggle?
So there's basically two components to this. There's pre-open and then post-open. So in terms of pre-open, the biggest problem I've seen has been kind of analysis paralysis. This is a fairly established industry, and a lot of the good spots have been taken, hence our approach to trying to go into parking lots. And so a lot of franchisees will veto a space that meets all of our criteria because they're finding a reason to they find a reason to get out of it. In terms of post-open, there's an inherent ramp up period in our business that other businesses don't have. If you open something like a pizzeria and you make the best pizza, then on day one you could have positive cash flow because people will come back 4 more times that week to have your pizza. But every car that comes through our doors on a grand opening, that car doesn't return until it needs its next oil change, no matter how good of a job you did. And so making sure that you have the long-term vision is in line with our model of, if you do this the way that we believe it should be done, that after the ramp up period's over and the oil change intervals start to overlap, you're going to start to see that exponential growth. But what happens in our space, especially when it comes to independent quick lubes, is they get really skittish that in month 6 they're only doing 6 or 7 cars a day, and then they start offering all these other services like installing the breathalyzers and selling U-Hauls, and they get away from the core business model, which is doing oil changes, and then they don't do a good job at that, which then leads to never getting out of that ramp up period. Whereas we wanted to make sure this model was designed specifically for the oil change only, because our macro view is that's what the consumer wants. That's what's going to allow us to scale, and that's what's going to allow us to penetrate the top of mind brand awareness, is by being the best in our space at what we do. And so that's we have franchisees that are in the system and they already know what the answer is going to be, and they're like, well, can we do state inspections? Like we just opened a new store in Dallas, Texas. He's like, oh, can we do state inspections? And the answer is going to be no. We don't want to get away from our core model, because then oftentimes that means having to hire skilled staff in order to do the inspection, and they're going to command more money, and it's going to be a higher insurance premium. And then all of a sudden, that model we built for low overhead so that we can minimize that ramp up period as much as possible gets all distorted, and then everything gets out out of whack.
So I heard basically, site selection sounds like a pretty critical part of the process. And it can slow people down to the point of not ever getting off the ground. And then once they get going, the key is just to follow your model or your system. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Site selection. Yep, for sure.
Let me ask you real quick about the site selection. At what point would you advise somebody who is interesting, but early on in the process, at what point should we start branching out and trying to locate a site?
Well, we provide a master broker that you'll engage with, and you can look them up, Morrow Hill. They'll assist with site selection, and they'll put plenty of addresses in front of you, and then it's up to the franchisee to do the due diligence and make sure that it's somewhere that you feel comfortable. Almost every brand, McDonald's was really the only one that ever got away with forcing franchisees to do the site that they chose. And so most brands do leave site selection up to the franchisee. But what that means is ultimately you have the final say. We have to sign off on it, but our model is designed for secondary markets. And so when we go into a primary market like a Charlotte or an Austin or a Miami, and we know that the model is going to work because it has the capacity to work. It's just a matter of finding the site and not rejecting it for something that doesn't really move the needle, something that doesn't make sense. And so, we provide the tools as best we can, but at the end of the day, it is the onus of site selection is on the franchisee.
Okay, and if you'll indulge me one more question, I'm sorry. So I don't know. I wouldn't be interested in just probably one or two. It would be 4 or 5 of the locations. And so if I want to have a goal of having 5, what would be the process that you would advise somebody as far as getting just one off the ground at a time, trying to do 2 or 3 at a time? What's the best approach?
From an operations standpoint, having 3 stores in a market, from a staffing standpoint, there's a lot of variables that get a lot easier once you have 3 stores, labor, inventory, etc. And so management at 3 stores, you can have a territory manager, and that's really helpful. But we have gone after developers that have multiple properties, and when you can say to them up front, hey, we want to develop 5 of these, it just gives you that much more leverage to negotiate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wally. Great questions. I'm going to run back to Tim and Jason. I know you were on mute a little earlier. Do you have a question for Costa? Okay. Jerry, how about you? Do you have another question?
No, at this point, I don't think I do.
Okay. Let's see. And then Christine, you're still on. Anything else come up?
No, not right now.
Okay. And then Andy Cathadia, do you have a question? Another question for Costa?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, I'll open it up. If anyone else has a question, I know Costa, you have time. You've got reception. It sounds great.
I'm at the toll right now. Give me 2 seconds.
All right.
But yes,
Michael,
I have time.
While he's paying the toll, could you tell us,
Thank you.
I know you say you've got a Discovery Day coming up. When is the one after this week or next?
Well, it's in August. I'll take that question because I'm in front of my calendar here. We usually will have it on the 3rd Wednesday and Thursday of each month. So generally it'll be around that time. In August, it's the 17th, 18th. And if you're going to fly in, we have a shuttle. If you can arrive at BWI Airport, Baltimore, we have a shuttle that goes from there to our corporate office in Hanover. We cover the hotel and the food costs. We just ask that you can get yourself there, and we stay at the Hampton Inn. We leave for dinner. We have a team dinner the Wednesday night, and then Thursday morning we start around 8:30. We get picked up at the hotel, go to the corporate office, and then we do an in-depth workshop that includes all of our supply chain, our real estate process, the leasing, our value set. We actually have a very nice session with one of our territory managers that comes up from Youngstown with one of his techs. And they're there. They basically give you a day in the life of what it's like being in a shop. I think what's interesting, they can articulate some of the differences between what they experience at Costa, how they treat their customers versus some of the other brands. And then we open it up for questions and answers. That's always a very interesting conversation. And then we also tour one of our shops. We've actually got a 2-bay that's about a third of a mile away from our corporate office. It's in Hanover. And then we've actually set one of the bays up to mirror what the interior of a kiosk would look like. So it's pretty interesting and fun. And then we have a shuttle that takes us back to the airport. And if you are flying in or out, if you book a flight anytime after 4:30 p.m., you should be fine to make it. And then certainly if you're close by, we can have you drive in.
Is anybody on the call going to the Discovery Day? You have one this week?
We do. I have one it's on Wednesday, Thursday. We have 4 candidates attending in person. And we do right now also offer the opportunity to attend virtually. If for some reason you can't make it, we have families, sometimes they just can't get away. So there's that opportunity. I think I've got 6 individuals that are going to be attending virtually. Are you interested in attending this particular one, or?
I don't think I can make it happen this week, but
okay.
I think I'm definitely interested in August.
Okay, great. All right.
Hey, Michael, sorry for interruption. Brian Griefer here. I'd also be interested if I could get the information for August as well.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll send that out. I have a summary, and then I also have the agenda as well. Actually, Christine is going to be joining us virtually. She's going to celebrate her birthday down in Mexico City. She's in New York right now traveling, and I think she's going to be able to spend 2 or 3 hours with us on a virtual connection.
Yes, I can do a few hours before I fly out.
Good. All right. Well, let's anyone else with a question before we end the call, and then hopefully as we work through the process with you on the call, ideally, I think to complete the process it's really helpful to attend the Discovery Day, whether you can do it virtually or in person. So hopefully we'll work to that process. All right, Costa, it looks like we don't have any more questions. Thank you. Safe travels.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I appreciate it.
All right.
Yes,
yep.
and thank you for putting this on.
Our pleasure. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.